We are dependent on the unconscious, like a newborn on its mother. But one day I came across a man who did not go into dreams. I was returning from them. There are truths that do not belong in the laboratory. There are observations which, though empirically consistent and experientially undeniable, must be locked away. Not for the sake of propriety or academic rigor, but to preserve something far more fragile, the sanity of the observer. I have studied dreams all my life. I have cataloged them, interpreted them, dissected them with surgical logic. And yet, this one man and what came through him made me question whether we have ever truly understood what we invite into our minds each night. His name was Karl Hofstetter, 33 years old, a mathematics lecturer at the university in Vienna. Unmarried, soft-spoken, and by all surface measures mentally sound. But the events that followed his arrival in my care during the damp spring of 1911 remain even now incomprehensible to any model I have ever constructed. His case was brought to me quietly, without the usual institutional noise. His family described him as dreaming wrong. Not nightmares, not night terrors, something else. He would sleep deeply, no movement, no murmuring, and then, at some moment in the night, he would sit upright in bed, eyes closed, and begin to speak. Not mumble, not ramble, speak. As though dictating a manuscript from memory, but the language he used was not his. The words were German, but old. I recognized archaic phrases from theological texts, philosophical fragments not in common circulation for centuries. He described places that did not exist, cities built from concentric mirrors, staircases that led down into nothing, wells with no bottom and water that reflected not the sky, but the one who waits behind it. His tone was never hysterical. He spoke with calm, methodical clarity, as though he were reporting facts from lived experience. He was not lost, he was transmitting. Under hypnosis, the patterns only deepened. His body would go still, his eyes fluttering beneath the lids, and then the voice, a voice not quite his own, deeper, more exact. He claimed in one such trance to have visited a corridor built from thought itself, where doorways opened into other sleepers. He said, "I am not dreaming, I am being dreamed." And when I asked, by what or whom, he answered only, "The one who does not sleep." For many weeks, I documented every session. The information he offered was consistent, increasingly elaborate, and utterly alien. Yet with disturbing frequency, aspects of what he described appeared in unrelated patients' dreams. Those who never met him, never knew of him. Recurring motifs, identical symbols, the eyes surrounded by spirals, the staircases bending backwards, a mirror that delays your reflection by 1 second, then 2, then doesn't reflect you at all. On April 19th, Karl vanished. He was locked in his room. No broken window, no forced door, no footprints, just absence. On April 19th, Karl vanished. He was locked in his room. No broken window, no forced door, no footprints, just absence. But in his place, on the bed where he last lay, was a sheet of paper. It held a crude but detailed drawing, a human figure with its head cracked open, and from within spilled countless thin lines, like roots or veins, all leading into a large black circle. Inside the circle, a single phrase was etched over and over again. "He sees through you when you sleep." I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize. I told myself he had suffered a rare form of dissociative fugue. Perhaps he walked into the river. Perhaps someone removed him. But I knew better. Because the night after his disappearance, I dreamed for the first time in over a decade. And in the dream, I was in a white room with no shadows. Everything was light, but the light did not illuminate. It emptied. There were no doors, no ceiling, just space, and an immense silence pressing against my ears. In the center stood a tall, emaciated figure draped in a robe made of writing. The symbols shifted as I stared at them. Latin, Greek, Babylonian, mathematical formulae, then symbols I could not read, that no human could. He had no face, just smooth, pale skin where eyes and mouth should be. But I felt him watching me, and I understood, not through words but through pressure, that he knew me, deeply, as one knows a child they have raised in secret. When I awoke, the pages of Carl's case notes were rearranged on my desk, a spiral pattern. At the center, my name, not written by my hand. From that day on, I ceased working with dreams. I burned the remaining notes. I told my colleagues Carl had suffered a nervous collapse and was transferred elsewhere. But at night, I began locking my mirror away in a cupboard, and I have not looked directly into it since, because sometimes I still dream of that room, and sometimes I feel myself move before my body does. That was the final page of Freud's private manuscript, found decades later among sealed files in a Viennese university archive. It was unsigned and in a different handwriting than his usual style, tighter, more symmetrical, as if traced. Experts still debate its authenticity, but none have explained how the reverse of the final page contains a mirror image of the text, legible only when viewed through glass. They wait for us to dream, because in sleep, we open. That was the last line I wrote in the black journal before sealing it in my drawer. I had resolved never to return to it. I had convinced myself that the horrors I had witnessed, Carl's vanishing, the mirror that moved, the voices that whispered through the walls of sleep, were the results of stress, imagination, overwork. But the human mind is not so easily fooled. Not when the thing watching you no longer needs your permission. It began again on the 17th of May, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the same hour Carl had once spoken his foreign truths. I awoke to a sound not of this world. Not a voice, not a word, but a click, like glass tightening in its frame. My room was silent, but the silence had changed. It was no longer absence of sound. It was the presence of listening. I turned toward the cabinet where I had locked away the covered mirror. I had placed books atop it, a cloth, heavy papers, but now they were on the floor, perfectly stacked. The mirror was uncovered, facing my bed, and though the room was pitch dark, I saw my reflection. Not clearly, dimly, as if my reflection were behind fogged glass or underwater. My limbs were still, but the image moved, slower than me, as though reacting with delay. He did not escape this dream. Sleep slipped through him. But what happened next?